Hey guys, Casey here with FarmHacker.com, and today I'm with my friend Adon, who makes maple syrup from his own backyard. And today, in part 3 of this series, Adon is going to show you how to boil maple sap into maple syrup.
This is the fun part of collecting sap, having a fire, which I love. But what I have here is I just do 3 levels of cinder block, 2 wide and 3 high, and then I do some pans, some like buffet pans on it. So I have one here. So this is the 3rd year we've used these. They're about 6 inches deep. I don't know how wide, maybe a foot wide by 2 long. And I'll do 3 of them across.
Okay.
So I'll just put the lip, it needs to have the lip on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And once I get the fire going, I'll put 3 across and I'll fill them up and just kind of check on them. What'll happen is if the sap gets too low in here, it'll scorch. It'll scorch and it'll just stick and it's done.
Yeah.
And that's happened a few times, and that's a really sad moment.
Okay.
You know, because it takes a lot of effort, or it takes a while for all that sap and that water content to boil off.
Mm-hmm.
And it sticks on there. It's sugar that's been burnt onto the hot pan, you know, and it's a pain to clean off. And then you just realize, like, I just lost syrup, which took a lot. The reason it's so expensive is it takes a while to get to syrup.
Yeah.
It takes time and effort to collect it and to boil it and then filter it and then bottle it, you know?
Yeah.
So all that process, it's just, it's a lot of man hours and effort, you know? And so that's why it's not like $1 a bottle, you know, because it takes a while. So.
So do you wait for the fire to get really hot?
Yeah, so
before?
because I do 3 pans across, my first year I only did 2 courses high of cinder block.
Yep.
And it wasn't enough for airflow.
Mm-hmm.
I also had them like turned sideways, so the side here was like this flush part here.
Okay.
And that restricted even more airflow. So I do them sideways so that airflow can go up and down, and then I go higher up so that there's just more airflow underneath. And what I try to do is I try to have fire extended out on either side of the sides here, so that it's really boiling well under all 3 pans. Because also too, what happened there was that middle pan was like lit up, and then the 2 side pans weren't boiling off quick enough.
Okay.
And so it was just a waste of time. It took a lot longer to boil off the sap, the extra water content. So I just create a fire here in the middle, and then I want to keep building it out on either side to make sure that there's enough heat under each pan.
Yeah.
too, when I first did it my first year, I just did it in like a tall kind of like pot, and you need more surface area to boil the sap off. So this like shallow but like wider pan is a good pan to use, and you'll see it at a lot of like sugar houses or like condensers where they're like getting rid of all that sap. They're these shallow, really like long pans because you want more surface area for that steam and that water content to boil off. And if you just have this like narrow tube of a pot, it's going to take a lot longer for that water content to boil off. So I found these buffet pans to be helpful, and I mean they're pretty resilient to the heat of the fire. You know, like if you were to do like a foil pan from like Dollar Tree, you're done. You know, like it's gonna burn right through it. You know, fire's a more intense heat than those little Bunsen burner things. So I wanted something that was metal, but something that wasn't gonna leach into the sap and the syrup. So I just got these from like a restaurant company in Cincinnati. You know, and they were. I don't even think they were $10. You know, and so this is the third year I've used them. And you could see they're like charred on the bottom, but at the end of the season I'll just kind of rinse them out a little bit and just kind of let them sit, and then before in January or February, before I start boiling again, I'll get some water and some soap and kind of clean them out again. But it's not like, I mean, it's just been syrup in there, so I just kind of make sure all that residue's cleaned out, and then I start over again, and I don't clean them until the end of the season. You know. So, and it seems to be fine and doesn't create any extra flavoring that's not tasteful, you know.
So one of the things about boiling your sap on an open fire, it gives it a different flavor than if you were just cooking it, right?
Yeah, so I mean, if you were to just boil it over a stove, which would be I would highly discourage, because it would create a lot of moisture in your house, which would be a real pain to deal with. So it's helpful to do it outside because you're not dealing with the moisture inside your house.
Right.
But then this is free wood source for me. Like I cut the trees down, I had to cut it, you know. But other than that, I didn't have to buy it, you know. So if you have like access to wood, that's a way to save yourself some money. Because the first year I did it, I had like a little pan burner, like electric, you know, single pan burner that you like plug into a wall. And we were at an apartment and we did it on my deck, and our electric bill was like through the roof, you know. So I was like, I need to use wood. But then mentioning the flavoring, it helps. It just makes it like a little smoky essence to it. It's not bitter or pungent, you know, but it has like a nice little subtle smokiness to it. That's like a really nice additive, I feel. And I know where what the wood source is, so it doesn't have any chemicals or anything in it. So it's not. I like it. I appreciate that. So. Get the fire going, and then we'll get the pans on, and we'll put the sap in. Gotta set the pans on. Got a nice little fire going. And set them 3 across. Get some sap in there real quick. And the key to this is to keep sap in the pan so that it doesn't boil down too much and then scorch the sap syrup mixture that's in there.
So do you fill these to the top, or how far?
I fill them pretty high, and not too high. I try to do about a 2/3 full, because what happens when the sap really gets boiling, it'll boil over, and so it really bubbles up, and that'll put your fire out.
Smells really good.
You smell that sugar?
Yes.
Yeah, I see. Like that's kind of burnt there. So it's kind of a fine balance of having sap, but not too much, but not too little. Gonna put these ice in there. Put this ice in too. So that'll just melt down. And there is some people say that if there's ice that it's probably all water and you can just dump it. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because sap is pretty high in water content, so it's gonna freeze. It's not all just sugar, you know. So I put it in there, boil it down. I just feel better about it instead of just throwing the ice away, because I just feel like I'm wasting something that could benefit my syrup volume. It's all about volume, you know. I mean, you have to boil off a lot of volume to get a little bit of volume of syrup, but I just would rather use it than dump it.
Yeah, you would think there would be some syrup in the pockets of the ice, you know, as it's when it freezes. But
so I get it about 2/3 full, and really I just really try to have a really nice fire going, because the higher the heat of the fire, the quicker it's going to boil off. Just like you were cooking, you know. So this, you want to get your pot of water boiling, you have to have a higher heat on your stove.
So this would take about 4 hours?
If I have a good fire going. I mean, I think here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buckets. I think we had, I don't think they were all full. So let's say we had 8 gallons of sap here, and then with the ice, we have 3 of those. Let's say we might have 10 gallons of sap here. So if we were to have all sugar maple, you have to boil off 40 gallons to get 1 gallon of syrup.
Okay.
So say these are high yield of sugar in the sap, we boil off 10. You know, it's not very much.
Okay.
But
what about other sap? How much?
So I have mainly, for what I got on my property, I have mainly silver or water maples. It's about 60 gallons of sap that you have to boil to get down condensed to about 1 gallon of syrup. So it's a lot, you know, you have to boil off 20 more gallons of liquid to get that same amount of syrup, you know. So sugar maples hence are more popular. Canada's leaf, you know, is the sugar maple leaf. It's not the red or the silver or the black maple leaf, you know. So it's the highest content of sugar maple, you know. So I'll just keep doing this until it gets to a rolling boil. That's what I really want to see. So it's starting to get that liquid, and you can see the steam come off of it right here. And that's, again, the wideness of the pan or the depth of the pan is really essential to allow more of that steam to come off. You can see that ice start to break down. And if it was just a pot, if I had a grate and just a pot, you know, it would take all the more longer to boil that down, which is what we started with, and it took forever.
So when it gets to a rolling boil,
I just want that. That's just where I want.
That's just where you want it to be,
you know. And so I'm just going to keep stoking the fire, adding wood to it, to make sure that I have a really good fire going. Because I don't want to be out here all day.
Right.
And like we talked about earlier, I don't have to stay around it the whole time. I could put a lot of wood under here, make sure the sap's at a pretty high level, go inside, do stuff in the yard, whatever I need to do. You know, I just need to kind of keep an eye on it, make sure that the fire's really nice and has a lot of wood in it, and that I have enough sap, because I don't want it to get too low and scorched.
Gotcha.
Because that it just wasted all my effort, you know, if it does that. And I've done that before, and it's no fun.
gotta get something else. Tell me about something. Where's that thing?
So you can see these two are like a rolling boil. And this one isn't, and it's just because these have more of a hotter fire underneath. So I just need to pick that one up.
Let me put the put in.
So what do you do if it starts boiling over?
So you can see here, there's some like foam
I'm
forming at the top.
Spider-Man.
And when this really starts rolling,
Yeah.
if the pan has too much sap in it, it'll bubble over. And so I just take this and just kind of have a lid kind of handy. If you have a bucket lid, it's helpful. And I just kind of fan the bubbles down
And
on
that
top
stops
of the
it
surface,
from...
and that helps it a lot. Yeah, that stops it. So can't always help it, but try to contain it back down, kind of. Yeah. We're now at the finishing stage of the syrup, and so we do that inside just because it's easier to control the heat and the temperature that we're boiling the sap with over a stove. So outside I try to get it down where it's pretty low in the pans, maybe about an inch or two in depth in the pans outside. And you could even see, I'm looking for how much is left in the pan, but then I'm also looking for color. And then I'll also like dip a stick in there and kind of taste the end of the stick because it's too hot to stick my finger in there, and just kind of see the level of sweetness. And if it's not super sweet, I'll let it boil down pretty low. But being over the fire, it could quickly scorch and then it's all gone. So I leave about a good inch or two in those buffet pans. And then I'll put it in like a pan that has, so I like to do a pan instead of a pot again because it's more surface area to boil off what we're boiling. And then the key is temperature now. So this is a candy thermometer, just kind of a standard candy thermometer. And where we're at in Northern Kentucky here in Cold Spring is you want to get to the boiling point for water, which at our elevation is 212 degrees. So I'll put the thermometer in there and I'll want it to get to 212 plus 7 degrees. So you boil off that much more of content. You want it to be, the liquid mixture to be at that high of a heat, and that lets you know that a lot of the water content has boiled off and you're at more of a sugar content. But what I found, so that'd be 219 degrees. What I found that when we get it to 219, it's still pretty runny. If we were to put that right in a bottle, if we were to filter it and put it in a bottle, we still, and like you were to put a cap on and you were to kind of tip it upside down, it's still really liquidy. And so I like to go more between the 220 to 225 range. And that's where we have a really nice thick syrup, higher sugar content. And we found that when we put that in a bottle and we tip it over, it's like, it's a thicker running syrup, The other thing I wanted to talk about too, some people will ask us like, when do we filter out some of the like bark and some of the sap sediment? There's kind of a sediment, like a granule kind of brown sediment that comes when you're boiling the sap. We do that after we boil it down to the 220-ish range, just because it's lesser volume. It's easier to filter off when it's in that thicker form of syrup. And it just is a lot of volume to do it when it's before we're boiling it out there. As sap, it's really runny. It takes a lot more effort to filter it out then. It might be maybe better, but we found that it's not harmful. It's just bark normally that we're filtering off.
And what about ventilation?
So yes, so ventilation is really helpful. We know some people that, they'll even just boil it in their house from start to finish. And we talked about if you have a sugar maple, it's 40 gallons of sap to 1 of syrup. So you would have 39 gallons of liquid swimming around in your house. That's with sugar, but we have primarily silver, so it'd be 60 gallons or 59 to 1 gallon of syrup. So, I mean, it would be all over paint. Like we've had friends that do paint's coming off their ceiling or their walls. Wallpaper is totally just swimming down the walls. So that's not ideal. So that's why I do it primarily outside, and then we just finish it inside to kind of control the temperature, make sure we don't scorch it, and we have more control over the heat towards the end. So
Cool.
So we'll get this to a boil, and then I'll just stick the thermometer in there. A lot of times I'll use like tongs because it hurts your hands.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of stick it in there and get a gauge for the temperature. And I mean, right now it's pretty, you know, we boiled this down the other night, and then we put it in the fridge because we didn't have time to finish it inside. Because you really have to, this is really where you have to be on it, you know. The closer it gets to that boiling point of water and higher, you really have to be on the stove and around it. So we had this in the fridge, so it's still pretty chilly, and we're just getting it going on the stove. So it's going to be pretty low read right now. But when it gets over that 212, closer to 220 mark, that's where we'll really be continually checking it. And then when it's done, we'll filter it, and then we'll just pour it right in a bottle. And the heat from the sap is really going to kind of seal that bottle. And we'll use old sap bottles, you know. I mean, these are like really small, but just from like a restaurant, you know. So we'll use those like for samples for like friends or family. And then what we primarily have are 8-ounce bottles that we just got, you know, from an online distributor, and like, you know, it's really thick. Like that's what we're looking for. Okay. You know. So this is still syrup that we have over from last year. So we have about 3 more bottles, 3 more of these left. So, and these are about 8-ounce bottles, and we'll save old jelly jars, you know, and we'll clean those out, run those through the dishwasher, or just clean them by hand. Anything that's kind of a glass jar is really helpful, especially if we're pouring in the sap or the syrup that was boiling on the stove. If it was a plastic bottle, it would obviously melt, you know. Yeah. You could use plastic bottles too, though, like old honey bottles, like the Little Bears, or peanut butter jars, you know. Anything really is, we try to use what we have so we don't have to go out and get stuff. For our first time, we got 12 of these just to see what we thought, and then we realized, man, we can use like old jelly jars and, you know, things that we already have bought. Yeah. If we were to sell them, this is kind of a nicer thing to sell, like at a farmer's market or at a store. You would want something like this to get these, but if you're just giving it to, you know, for yourself or family or friends, it doesn't really matter. You just need something to contain it that's going to seal. And then what we'll do is we'll put these in the freezer, and they'll keep. I mean, like I said, this is from last year, so 12 months. It's kept in the freezer. If you were to put it in the fridge, your shelf life would be shorter, so the freezer just extends it. You couldn't just put it like in your pantry though. You might be able to, like if you bottled it in a more like proper way, but we haven't done that, so that probably could. I mean, because obviously at the grocery store they have maple syrup, so we haven't gotten that far into it to really know. So.
Thanks again for sharing that, Adon. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please check the description below for links to items we may have used, as well as a link to our website, farmhacker.com, where you'll find more awesome stuff like this. Also, please subscribe to our channel, and you'll be notified as soon as there are new videos posted. Thanks for watching.